the responsibility and to be that self intrinsic motivation is called for. Self intrinsic is something, is kind of motivation which comes from within a teacher. I try to apply several external forces to stimulate that kind of motivating factors in you. However, unless I feel the urge to uh, practice, to absorb those principles, things could be very difficult. Now we have been talking a great deal about online teaching. Every day, every hour, several messages pop up on your WhatsApps and on your email. You find that several webinars are organized for teaching online, using online tools, overcoming the challenges and constraints of COVID times, etc. So it's brought about a great revolution, a phenomenal change in the lives of teachers, from school education to higher education. So whatever it is, so we teachers should not consider this as an unpalatable task, but rather that preparedness is important. So unless you love what you do, you would not be able to deliver the goods in a judicious manner. So that is what Secondary Education Commission is precisely trying to explain or define what professional ethics is. And finally, it leads to self-fulfillment and self-expression. I'll move on to my next slide. And to know more about what this term is, it's a set of beliefs that a teacher accepts concerning relationships with students, colleagues, and employers. Yes, we did formulate some guidelines, like some certain norms when we behave, when we convene for a meeting, when we go to the class, we have to dress up in a particular manner. We have to raise our voice and teach. We cannot abuse anybody. We cannot punish. Corporal punishment has been totally ruled out from the educational system. So we have already framed several such regulations. And accordingly, we have learnt over a period of time, over ages, since ages, society living, decency, discipline, respect, love, all these qualities, which are called values, they have been imminent in our mindset, they've totally become absorbed in our system, and then we practice them. So it's a set of beliefs. And why do we practice? Because it's a belief that yes, if you go this way, you will succeed. And it's a set norm, acceptable. But there could be some exceptions. It's a tough, topic, I would say. Professional ethics is a broader term, and it may not be convincing. Sometimes when we talk about code of conduct, ethics, what is right to me may not be right to you. It varies from person to person depending on their ideologies and perceptions. However, though there are some exceptions to the case, still we believe that these are set of beliefs that a teacher accepts when she deals with the people, parents too. When there may be complaints, often parents call us as mentors. Sometimes engineering colleges insist that they delegate the task of even mentoring the students, assigning group of students to every teacher, especially in the first year. And we call for parent-teachers meetings as well. And this will improve their ranking, and NBA, during NBA, that will fetch the institute some marks when these kind of activities are conducted by the organization, college or organization. So how do we deal with parents? We need to be patient enough when dealing with them. We need to take them into confidence that yes, this is a problem the student faces, is a problem learner faces, and accordingly you have to speak convincingly. So these are all practices which we have been following. We have known some of them, and some we are yet to explore or unravel. This is another, last one, second one we could take a look at. Professional ethics encompass the personal and corporate standards of behavior expected of professionals. Yes, this is what I was trying to tell. And Western Canada Center for Professional Ethics was established at Case Western Reserve University, Canada. So in Indian context, we are yet to employ them rigidly, though far-fetchedly they have, we try to question, like there are whistleblowers when there's a problem. However, they're not streamlined in our education system or in our society. Probably in the days to come, in the years to come, 5 or 10 years from now, probably that act also will be implemented or executed. So as I said before, we are going to look at definitions we have already had a look at, and then history dated to classical books, literature, etc. And then types, dimensions, codes, theories. So I was referring to Mesopotamian Epic of Gilgamesh. These are 5 literary pieces or philosophies that have been propagated or projected in ancient times itself during Greek and Mesopotamia and even Sumerian history. So I'm going to share a word file with you to know in detail about all of this. So Epic of Gilgamesh is an epic poem from ancient Mesopotamia that is often regarded as the earliest surviving great work of literature. So it's the oldest text after the pyramid text, in fact, dating back to 2100 BC. So what is the role of ethics here? So what does it teach? It teaches especially about the code of conduct for the king who's tyrannic in his nature, and then his friend comes to his rescue to teach him his code of conduct, especially when dealing with his subjects. So here administration is involved. Again, code of conduct indirectly is also involved. Yeah, this is about Gilgamesh is introduced to us as a tyrant king. And it has several, Epic of Gilgamesh has several moral themes, but the main theme is that love is a motivating force, and other moral themes in this epic are the inevitability of death and the danger of dealing with the gods. So slightly religious and sort of superstitious in nature. However, to some extent we could draw its roots from these kind of ancient works. And moving on to Iliad as an epic poem by Homer. Yeah, the poem invites us to reflect on the nature of war itself and the use of force, proper or improper, legal or illegal, as it shapes our understanding of virtues, yes, honor and responsibility, and even vices such as excessive pride, vengeance, and cruelty. If you have known the story of Helen of Troy, then perhaps you will understand these qualities of pride, vanity, cruelty, which is these are at stake in one person, and one person considers it to be, to protect his honor and responsibility. So interpretation, in various ways it is interpreted, and the whole story centers around these themes. Yeah, another two, these appear quite new for us even while I was referring to these texts long back, because I was teaching professional ethics to my PhD students at NIT. Then I was working on all of these, and I realized that I never knew about the etymology of Edda or what Edda actually is. So in fact, these are the Icelandic manuscripts compiled in the 13th century, totally based on Norse mythology. So the essence of these ancient works is about the intimate relationships between humans, gods, and nature, and the deep reverence that was built upon these beliefs. So here there is a norm. What am I trying to drive home? The point is that adherence to some authority, abiding to certain norms, has already been imbibed in us, dated back to 13th century. And these are some of the works. And the Sumerian Almanac, it happens to be the oldest one, which is related to agriculture. In fact, it's the first farmer's almanac on record. It is dated to around 1700 to 1500 BC. And it was discovered in very late in 1949 by an American expedition in Iraq. So Sumerians identified the calendar, almanac, way back in 1700 BC itself. What is good, what is bad, when to do the right thing, when to do the wrong thing. So even now we follow these superstitions related to our societal living. Then the last one is instruction of Amenemop.
Madam,
Hello, yes.
madam, excuse me. Play that appropriate slide, madam. Not yet.
You are unable to view this?
We can't see the appropriate slide, madam. Please verify once.
Okay, fine.
Madam, after 8th slide, we could not see any of the slides. The last slide we could see was 8th one, history of ethics.
All right, fine. I was trying to show you another word. You should have hinted me before itself. No problem. I'll quickly scroll down. Can you see now? Hello? Is the word?
No, madam.
Okay,
No, madam, no.
What I'll do is I'll say stop sharing. Again, I'll go for present now.
All of you please mic.
I clicked on a window. 1 minute. Now, present now, a window. Share option is not highlighted. Can you see now? Hello?
No, no.
No, madam.
Panda, just guide me.
Okay, go to present now, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah.
One
Go to a window.
Wait a minute. Yes, I'm doing that. Present now.
Okay, now go to a window.
A window.
And select your slide, ma'am.
No, it's a word file,
Okay, that will do. That will do.
but it doesn't appear on the screen here. Share
Okay, so
and
you go for entire screen, madam. You go for entire screen. Click on that.
full screen.
Save.
Share option is not. Okay. Is it viewed now?
No, it's not. It has not come yet.
I could see it on the. Okay, now it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. You can
Let's quickly go back.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll
Please.
quickly take a look at these 5 origins. I was referring to the first one as Epic of Gilgamesh, which is considered to be an epic poem from ancient Mesopotamia, and which is regarded as the earliest surviving great text of literature. So the main focus here is about dealing with the subjects, people, code of conduct inscribed in those days. The story centers around the Gilgamesh, who is the first Greek hero and who is known to be a king. And his friend comes to his rescue. It is mythical in nature. It has several moral themes. The main theme centers around love is a motivating force. Though it is not acceptable to the king, it takes a tough time for the king to understand these morals and these ideologies. Second one, I was referring to Iliad, which is again a great ancient Greek poem, great work of Homer. The poem invites us to reflect on the nature of war itself and the use of force as it shapes our understanding of virtues such as honor and responsibility and vices. So on one hand, you have good represented by Helen of Troy and the fight to rescue her. And on the other hand, you have the person trying to abduct her and with the qualities of vengeance, pride. Had he known that this is wrong, then probably that wouldn't have happened at all. So Iliad wouldn't have happened. So the battle between honor and shame and cruelty and responsibility, that is how it goes. Yeah, Edda and Edda, in fact, it's a term used in, these are the manuscripts in Iceland, dated to 13th century. So all these rules come to us from ancient history. Law, as though, of course, now we follow the constitution, but before that, human laws have already been inscribed or prescribed in these forms of works. Then Sumerians' almanac, I was referring to Sumerians' almanac, which is like a calendar guiding the farmer about the time to sow or plow or harvest the seeds, etc. Basically related to agriculture. So interestingly, this was discovered only in 1949. Though it was dated, initially it was written in 1700 to 1500 BC. So it is still preserved in the museum. And the last one is instructions of Amenemop. These are called instructions of wisdom. Like we have these proverbs which are wise sayings from the elders. Like empty vessels make much noise, make hay while the sun shines, then strike iron while it is hot. So though they're very epigrammatic, the sentences are very short, but then they convey very broad information, philosophical message hidden in that, implicit in such sayings. So likewise, instruction of Amenemop also is dated back to ancient Egypt period, 1300 to 1075 BC, where the father tries to educate his son with some maxims. This is good, this is wrong, rules of administration. Even Arthashastra, Kautilya's Arthashastra, Chanakya's Arthashastra, sorry. So all these have come at a later stage, but then even if you look at Greek history, we find that these rules already existed. So this is what is in brief about the history of professional ethics, and now I'll show my PPT. Do I need to select again? Okay. Are you viewing this PPT? If not, I'll reselect.
Yes, ma'am. We are watching it. No problem. It's okay, ma'am.
Fine.
You go back and do that. The same way. No problem.
Yes, there have been other schools of thought as well related to Socrates.
Madam, your screen share is not there.
Hello? Yes?
Your screen share is not there, madam. Please share the screen.
I'm sorry. So it is not... now? Hello?
Yes, ma'am. No, yes, not come.
Not yet?
Not yet.
I'll try to select it again.
No.
I'm sorry for the inconvenience caused.
It's okay, ma'am.
present present now, entire screen, share. It has to be highlighted. Once again, I'll try to. I'll cancel it. I'll go for full screen, present now. It's taking time to accept.
Huh? Yes. Did you
Now
go
it's,
to?
yeah, it's highlighted now. Yes. Do you see it?
No, ma'am. You have gone for your screen. So minimize your screen and open that. Madam, please go for a. Hello.
Yes.
Madam, you go for presenting to a window rather than your screen.
Okay, fine. I'll again. I'll say stop sharing.
No. Go for presenting. Go to present. Present now.
You're presenting. Okay. 1 minute. This is presenting.
So click on stop presenting. Stop presenting. Okay, and come back.
Present now.
Present now. Yeah.
A window.
Go to window.
Okay. Okay, I'm very sorry about it. Is it back now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes,
Fine. So to look at some more theoretical views. Anyway, this is only one. I'm not going back to any other slides. So we'll continue. No more interruptions further. Fine. So Thomas Hobbes and Socrates also speak about laws and punishment, etc. They have entered into a social contract which have already been formulated. So I'm just giving you a peripheral view of all this. So there was this from Thomas Hobbes speaks about the state of lawlessness to self-realization of the need of governance, etc. So unless there is an insistence, there's a mandate, it would be difficult to tune or tame the minds of humans. So here, this describes in ancient days how people were and how imperative it has become to impose these rules and codes of conduct on people. So they're solitary, poor, nasty, short, aggressive, adamant, harsh, brutish, egocentric, self-centered, self-interested. So from this kind of chaotic selves, there was a need to arrive at a more systematized kind of living. The distinction between ethics, morals, and etiquette. So briefly, we'll take a look at morals and values. So morality is a differentiation of actions between those that are right and wrong. And etiquette is a code that governs social behavior within a society, class, or a group. And ethics is a philosophy of moral values. So this is a backdrop kind of mastermind in teaching us all of these behavior, values, good, bad, etc. Yeah, to know more about this, what ought or what not to be done in a given situation. So how did we learn to be empathetic? How did we learn to be kind towards people? So these are the things, these are our morals which we uphold. So when we travel in a bus, we learn to offer a seat to, or a train. When we travel by train, we learn to offer a seat to a pregnant lady or an old lady. Sometimes we only certain seats are reserved. However, very few people take or have the kindness to help them. Some people feel even if I don't offer a seat, that is fine. So good, what is to be done, what is not to be done. Even ideals, it is also connected to people, policies, and ideals. This we have seen, all right. Yeah. Then values. Values or a value is defined as a principle that promotes well-being or prevents harm. It is beyond your morals, which you really apply in your day-to-day life. It is embedded with your living. If you are living a domestic personal life, social life, professional life, and academic life. So with the community around you, with the people, so all the stakeholders. So how well you deal with it. In other words, it's like interpersonal skills. Yeah. To begin with, probably that would be a preliminary kind of term that can be used to understand human values in imbibing all the good qualities of reverence, love, value, gratitude, forgiveness, being kind to others, not taking things to heart. So these are human values which we have to practice, not only for self-satisfaction, but also for the well-being of the family, for the well-being of the society, and for the well-being of, on a larger gamut of things, for the well-being of the nation as well. So starting from oneself, yourself, inner self to the world, inner world to outer world, outwardly. So how well you deal with yourself. In fact, Maslow's needs of self-actualization, the pyramid of Maslow, if you have this is called hierarchy of needs. So he also talks about how man would, any person for that matter, it starts with fulfillment of one's needs. You need to fulfill your hunger, basic needs, food, shelter, etc. Of course, these days, technology also has become one of the necessities. Without looking up at your phone and looking up WhatsApp, you could never be in peace. Like maybe every half an hour or every 1 hour, depends. The frequency also varies from person to person. So after fulfilling your self needs for you, then family needs, then you try to be good in the eyes of others, people around you. You're not happy when you fulfill all your needs. Okay, I ate a sumptuous meal today. I ate my breakfast, idli and dosa with a coffee. Then lunch, I'm going to eat biryani. And then dinner, it's going to be pizza, etc. But then you're not happy at that. Then you're going to look beyond that. Look at your relationship with the outer world. So basically with family, with your spouses, with your in-laws, parents, relatives, children sometimes. Do they respect you? Are they adamant? How are you dealing with people around you? Is there a concomitance between you and your wife and husband, etc., the relation? Then you try for outside recognition, your identity. All of us maybe all of you may be working, or some of you may be studying, you may be scholars, pursuing your higher studies. Some of them may be good administrators in their organizations. So whatever the fields we are in, we try to attract the attention of people, gain for identity, look for that kind of security. So this is, I'm talking about Maslow's, MASLOW, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There are 5 steps in the pyramid, starting from basic needs to family, family to society, society to, again, finally, the outer world at spiritually and psychological level. After achieving all these, is a person happy? Is he able to balance, strike a balance among all these factors? Personal self, that is you. What are my needs? Am I fulfilled? Am I happy? If I'm not happy, I'm not satisfied with the kind of job, with the qualifications I'm done, with the way things are happening in the department. So ultimately it should lead to happiness, actual or self-realization, self-actualization it is called, when you retrospect. So there has to be a balance of all these factors. That is what Maslow talks about. And all this is possible, and it is connected to your personal values, emotional beliefs, or emotional intelligence as well. Yeah, it is broadly connected to your understanding. I hope you understand the term emotional intelligence. Are your EI levels high? So if they are high, if they are good, then you are able to deal with all of this, grapple with all of this, what I listed according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So, okay. Then we have legal, ethics, etc. types. Yeah, this is important. Ethics, modern times philosophers have divided ethical theories into 3 general subject areas. So we have meta-ethics. Meta is above, like metacognition you have. Cognitive, metacognitive, and affective. Rebecca Oxford talks about these strategies, the way learners remember, memory learning strategies. So there she uses the term metacognitive learning, metacognitive strategies. So in that context, meta-ethics is the origin of ethical principles. And then, yeah, we're going to look at more examples. Still, I'm talking about theory. Then as we move on, I'll invite examples from you as well. I would also like to hear from you. Then normative, we arrive at moral standards, what is right or wrong conduct. And the third one is applied ethics. So meta-ethics, normative ethics, and applied ethics. These are 3 broader classifications of the term ethics. And from these emanate other classifications, whether it is professional ethics or engineering ethics or legal ethics, etc. So nomenclatures vary. However, they can be broadly categorized or broadly connected to these umbrella terms. So to interpret further, meta-ethics relate to egoism versus altruism. Altruistic nature is selfless service. Like, you're not self-centric, you're not ego, you don't work for the benefit of something. You render free service, not aiming, not expecting much from the other person or a group. Emotion versus reason. So sometimes you try to interpret things emotionally. You succumb to your emotions. Not always are you able to logically or rationally resolve a problem. A child behaving in a very arrogant manner, an adult succumbing to various vices. So what do you, if you apply reason, then does it work there? So the conflict between emotion and you have to deal with your emotion there. Come down, yield, understand from the girl or boy's perspective. rather than trying to impose your rules or the standard norms on them. Ideally speaking, yeah, they have to be obedient, they have to be respectful, responsible, etc. But then it may not work with, there are some exceptions. So these are all issues related to meta ethics, male versus female morality. So as I said, the term is complex and varied, and perceptions vary. So we cannot generalize, but it's a journey of learning. This 1.5 hour time, and probably you will ponder over these thoughts at a later part as well. So male versus female morality. So society, Western society does not impose any laws on that. There are no distinctions or discrimination. However, in other cultures, yes, there are differences between genders. We have something called, this is just, I thought you must know about this term, deontological ethics, derived from the word deon, meaning duty. Though the term appears very complex, deontological, but then the meaning is very simple. It's a category of normative ethical theories that encompass any theory which is primarily concerned with adherence to certain rules or duties. Further theories, yes, utilitarian ethical theories, deontological ethical theories, virtue ethical theories, and then contractarian ethical theories. The third column is contractarian. So more or less the essence is the same. The titles vary. The titles vary, but the essence of all these theories is to propagate good and to advocate discipline, decorum, peace, etc. So I'm just skipping this. You could just try to remember only the 4 titles. This would be interesting. I was talking to you about, now try to, before I proceed with this slide, I would like to hear a couple of examples from you about moral or dilemmas. Like, when did you feel that, yes, what this was wrong? Try to recall, each one of you should recall at least 2 instances where you regretted for having done this, where your mind underwent a kind of a conflict and turmoil after making such a decision. So we'll just take a pause for 1 or 2 minutes. I would want every one of you to reflect on 2 examples where, to recall 2 instances in your professional life or personal life, where you felt guilty and regretful about it. Shall we do that exercise, please? And randomly, I would ask you to share your views. And you could start noting down. Is that agreeable to all of you? You could post it in chat box. I'll minimize this.
Please unmute yourself and please respond. Please unmute yourself and respond.
Madam, can I say?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, ma'am, this is Professor Mrs. Soman. As you said, such dilemmas twice had happened. First, when I had to drop my 1-year-old son at creche and I had to go to attend college, I really had that dilemma whether is it really needed to keep my son over there in the creche and go to attend my professional duties. So that was for the first time. Secondly, when I had taken a sabbatical leave for completion of my PhD, and I was having a senior position at college itself regarding my teaching responsibilities as well as admin responsibilities. So I had really that dilemma whether I should take that 1-year leave. It was very crucial as far as my experimentation and analysis was concerned that I had to take that 1-year leave if I wanted to complete my PhD. So that was again the second dilemma. That's it.
Thank you very much. Wonderful beginning. Very apt example quoted, which often a mother, especially women, go through. So thank you very much for sharing your experience. Now let's hear from Miss Uma when I'm in final year due to my personal problems. Could you complete that, please? Okay, you were studying and then you missed your family. Are you trying to say that? Lakshmikant Gadam, when I do not reach out to my loved ones and well-wishers' expectations. Okay, you feel lost, or you feel insecure perhaps. Yes. Okay, this is again at a higher level. That's also a good example. That's a good example shared by Mr. Lakshmikant. Reaching out to the expectations of loved ones.
And computer science. It is not in focus.
Okay. Sir, I saw another journal, Frontiers of Psychology.
Frontiers group के अच्छी जर्नल्स हैं. But वो confirm करने ना कि वो focus Web of Science में होना चाहिए.
Web of Science आप देखते हो बस focus में नहीं.
Exactly. Okay. Choosing a career. I put here some crosstalk. Fine. Choosing a career for my son, either medicine or true. Even yeah, because they are two different professions and which decide the professional life of a person. Exactly. Even choosing a college in engineering, most of them qualify this NEET exam or JEE exam, and then they come to me as well. Most of my relatives. Dr. Panda, I could hear some crosstalk.
Because I think that training has come to information officer. No, it has come to IC.
Exactly. So often, very regularly, on daily basis, I feel. Now these days, though we work from home. Hello, when we work from home, in fact, ironically, it is all the more grueling. The working hours are very regular. Sometimes meetings are scheduled on Saturday, Sunday, and then you need to attend to all the meetings called for by the administration. Then we have popular invited talks happening. So every time, like then things are on my mind, on my to-do list. Today I'm done with this, then tomorrow another list is ready. Since I'm heading the department, then everything has to be passed on to my colleagues, either in the form of mails or calling for meetings, again preparing the minutes of the meeting, circulating to them. So one after the other, seriously we are into this kind of work. So out of these, I think maybe a small percentage, 20 to 30% of times we are indecisive. You know, we are like Hamlet, to be or not to be decision. Most of it.
Madam, there is a background sound, please.
Okay, from my end, 1 minute. Yeah, I'm very sorry about it, Panda. I hope it's fine now. Yeah, I was referring to the indecisive and perplexed nature of the work that we do. So 20 to 30% we have to think twice and decide whether it is right or wrong. Like, to quote another example from my end, recently we have selected PhD scholars for the department, and only 2 scholars have joined, and then we are 5 in the department, and one faculty who joined last October, she doesn't have any scholar. So then rightfully speaking, she has to be given a scholar. But then we arrived at some consensus last semester, stating that after the seniors get the scholars, the junior will be given opportunity for guideship. So for that matter, if we strictly go by that, the faculty who joined 2 years ago, they were given other faculty apart from the recent one who joined. There were 2 faculty who joined 2 years ago. So they were allotted one scholar. But there were cases in the past where seniors like me, we were without scholars for 5 to 6 years. So I can question them on these grounds that when I struggled, give me a chance. Like, of course, I got one scholar last sem. This time also I'm getting one. However, if you strictly go by the rules, then that would be the ideal one. So that's the conflict. Either I should pass on the scholar to the new faculty who is joined, or should seniors be given the term. So before I called for the meeting, I had to give it a serious thought. Then I had to convince the girl also, because she was quite enthusiastic. She said, "Ma'am, why not you give me students? I would be able to guide certainly." Because she's a youngster, though she is fresh recruitee, and she doesn't have much of teaching experience. So on those grounds, I try to explain to the faculty that you better get acquainted with the system at NIT, teaching, everything, the evaluation pattern. So, and in fact, it's been only 6 months she's there, and since March we have had this lockdown. So she hardly has any exposure to academic work. Then she was convinced finally. So that was a dilemma I was going through recently from my experience in the department, which I thought I must share with you. So likewise, there are many dilemmas, which course to offer.
Madam, with your permission, if I can reflect on one conflict that most of us face in the professional thing. We are usually on a job, maybe middle of the term, and then there'll be a good opportunity coming your way. Now you're in a dilemma whether you have to leave this job that requires you then through the term, or maybe, in academics, good prospects don't come our way very soon. So you want to jump for a good one. So a dilemma there, and lots of conflict within us.
True. Yeah, honestly speaking, yes, I was going through this kind of dilemma last year. I had applied, since my family is at Hyderabad, and I work at Warangal. Weekends I travel. Husband also joins me at Warangal, and then he shuttles like Hyderabad to Warangal. So family is keen that she moved to Hyderabad. So I had applied for EFLU. This was more than a year ago. Then I was going through a lot of conflict in my mind, and that has affected my health as well. I didn't realize that stress was acting on my health. Because job-wise, that's a central university, and better prospects, as you said. Whereas family, so should I sacrifice my profession for my family, which is in the forefront? That's a very, fundamental or a big kind of dilemma or decision that has to be made. Choice between my profession, having achieved so much, having struggled so much in my career, should I sacrifice it for the sake of my family? Or is family the prime, takes a prime place? So yes, very often we go through this. Fortunately or unfortunately, those got cancelled for some reason, and I relaxed. But then it was such a tough time for me to make a decision. Then one more example we'll take: whom to listen and whose expectations to be fulfilled when the question of wife and mother come. Exactly. So that's true. Most of them go through. I'm also reminded of a similar example when one of my family friends, his only son, and then his married wife works, she's a government employee, a teacher, in fact, working for a government school, and he works in a private engineering college. So they do not get along well, mother-in-law and wife. So mother has to stay alone. He has to look for a house, put her in the house, and provide her with all the needs. 3 days he stays with mother, and 3 days he stays with his family. So imagine the kind of stress the person goes through. So whom to listen to? If he listens to his mother, then family life would suffer. If he listens to family, then mother would suffer. So with right understanding, I think right understanding at all levels, in all people. It's not that I think right and then other person thinks wrong and things will resolve. So that kind of uniform kind of thing, that awareness or broad understanding, to the extent possible, we can minimize. I don't say that we can rule it out totally, but ensure that we should not take it to our heart, and to the extent possible try to not stress out from these experiences. Try to resolve it in a peaceful manner. That is what is the essence of universal human values. These days we have this lot of sessions going on related to universal human values, which relates to understanding people, right understanding. There's a common term used there. How well you understand what is the cause of conflict. Understand the root cause of conflict and then grapple with it in a systematic way. So that is what is the essence of that. Perhaps that will be taught to you during this session. At NIT, we have undergone this training 3 times, and we are teaching first years also. It's become mandatory for all the engineering graduates to go through this universal human values course as part of orientation program before they join BTech program. For 15 days they organize this. So teachers, we are trained and we have taught them. So right from engineering level, if these principles are taught to them, then probably when they grow up and they enter into their worldly life and confront people, then they would not go through this kind of stress and trauma that we are going through. So that's the vision of the advocates of universal human values. I think at Hyderabad it is Professor Pradeep Ramancherla from IIIT Hyderabad. He is a civil engineering professor, but then he is doing great service to the society. He visited NIT several times, and it is going a big way rather. This kind of conducting workshops on universal human values, especially to overcome this kind of dilemmas. I'm sharing this because we are connected, we are speaking about that. So yeah, brain and conflict between brain and heart says something, and brain instructs something all the time versus mind. Yes, sometimes it is mind or heart, and then the practical demands on you. You feel heart in heart, you feel, no, I do not want to leave this place. I do not want to take up that job. I do not want to apply for IIT at Bhubaneswar or IIT Goa. Sometime back I wanted to apply, but then some of my well-wishers and mentors said, no, you cannot leave Hyderabad, you cannot travel, you have children, parents, and then so drop the idea. So likewise, your heart says I should go, but then the circumstances around you instruct that, you know, yes, you should drop the idea. So that's such conflict. Whatever the conflict, now we should be in a state to avoid taking it to the heart. Whatever the decision, you need to accept it. That is the ultimate takeaway from it. Only then you could work peacefully. So if you live in regret, then you are ruined totally. You're shattered. So let that not happen. That's very important. Heart or mind? It can be anything. Good question. Thank you by Ms. Anita. What do you want us to prefer? Yes, most often unfortunately, we are placed or living in a society where we do not have choices to go by our heart. Heart in heart, whatever you feel, not even 30% of it happens. But then you try to rejoice in what the circumstances demand, rather than make it a painful experience, and apply logic there. You can apply several. You weigh the pros and cons. Take a book, notebook, chalk it out. One side you put these are the advantages. Other side you put these are the advantages. So when my decision about coming back to Hyderabad to IFLU, the chances were 50-50. This is a new life, of course, totally new life. That is also new. Equally, they were equal in fact for me. Though my heart said I should be at NIT, honestly speaking. Then I tried to analyze things. I tried to analyze, and I thought finally, okay, if I get a call, let me think about it. And I did not get a call at all, because they were scraped out for some legal issues. So that is, but when we go by heart, it gives us, true, it gives us happiness. But now the society does not give us such a choice. That liberal freedom or liberality is not with us. Often it is intertwined with your family. You feel something, but your husband might not like the idea. since we are living in a society, you should know how to negotiate with people, with spouses, with family members, and ultimately live in peace. That is important. So this kind of inputs, all this kind of knowledge should enable us to minimize stress and move on. Okay, fine. Now I'll move on to my next slide. Shall I? Yeah, these are some of the dilemmas listed here. Uncertainty about which job offer to take. All that you listed exactly reflects here. Whether to purchase. These are general dilemmas. Classical dilemmas are general dilemmas, unlike ethical dilemmas. Ethical is to do with when you intervene with the norms, legalities. You deliberately try to fail a boy or try to push him up. So there you are, that is more dire offense. So classical are whether you purchase a flat or construct a house, whether you invest in gold, whether if women may want to invest in gold or in charity. So the options vary from person to person. Whether to move to a new city. All that examples we have already witnessed. Okay. I'll move on to ethical dilemma. Yeah, here he's forced to decide between two morally sound options, but they may conflict with the established boundaries of a business, a governmental agency, or the law. They involve following the truth versus being loyal to a friend. I'll maximize here. An ethical dilemma differs from a moral dilemma because it very much involves following rules rather than conscience, as I said. So ethical, another example I would like to quote. So 3 years ago, while I was guiding one of the scholars, he was found to be working elsewhere because he was not given scholarship. He joined NIT without institute scholarship. We have limited number of scholarships offered for scholars who join with NET. NET is basic eligibility. So we have with and without institute fellowship. So that person joined under this scheme without institute fellowship. And once after first semester, second semester onwards, he would move on and off, 3 days here and 3 days at his workplace. And there at his workplace, he has taken permission that is applying for PhD full time. So that's where an RTA case was filed, and somebody, one of his rivals, where he had an old rivalry with somebody during his college days, that person put up a case, and we were asked to give explanation. Then when we inquired, he is on rolls at that college, elsewhere he was working, and he was not drawing scholarship. However, he was working full time. So that led to a lot of controversy, and his admission was at stake. Then he came weeping, he was in tears, and then finally we tried to bail him out of the situation. And he approached CEL also, the PhD council, etc., etc. Yeah, there they were very demanding. One instance they said was, why don't you see him through now that he is in third year? You say that he completed his coursework and is submitting, and where is the question of cancelling his admission? That was a kind of a decision made by the group of people he had approached. And then they come to me in the presence of the head of the department, former head, and my colleague. Then they came to me and they were demanding that you write and say that he's completed all his work and he's in the thesis is in the writing stage. So there it's, if I do, again, it's to be or not to be, like Scylla and Charybdis kind of thing, between devil and deep sea. That was against my, beliefs and against my doctrine. How could I approve of somebody's work without being completed? But practically that was demanding. The situation was demanding because RTI case was filed and they wanted cancellation of PhD. So more legal and more formal is such kind of dilemmas. We'll take a look at some examples. Secretary discovers her boss has been laundering money and she must decide whether or not to turn him on. A doctor refuses to give a terminal patient morphine, but the nurse can see the patient is in agony. A teacher was also the one who asked her athletes to give her their cell phone. Yeah, is it? Yeah, same example. Are you allowed to speak even before interviews? If somebody is in the administrative position, can he call the prospective candidates and talk to them? Some people do that. Even in the department, this was happening when we recruited ad hoc faculty and even PhD scholars. So alarmingly, you will find that the students were bombarded to the core that they never turned up, and that's how we ended up not having any scholars for the last 4 or 5 years. So it could have, a kind of snowball effect while we involve in such things. But then make a wise decision. Do not be brief, be wise, and convey what you want to say, rather than getting entangled into their personal and advising them, etc. So that sure, as long as you do that, that is allowed. Okay. Moral dilemma is torn between right and like all that you cited now. Family and saving, staying with them, putting the child in a crash. So your mind goes through this kind of conflict. So these are all ideological kind of theoretical examples that are given here. Okay, last two maybe can be related. Yeah, even pilots sometimes have to make a wise decision. Even in army, people fighting, the soldiers fighting at the borders, sometimes have to go by their instinct to do right thing, to make or sometimes they surpass the instructions given by the seniors. Recently, I was watching this movie, which is based on a lady pilot who fights against all the odds imposed by the society. I'm unable to recall the name, but it's based on a real story. It's a biopic of a pilot in North India who really...
Gunjan Saxena.
Exactly. Thank you, Dr. Panda. Right. Gunjan Saxena is a movie I was watching, and there she tries to apply her own mind and takes risks and succeeds, fortunately. So these are termed as moral dilemmas. Yeah. Death penalty, euthanasia, I think. Then abortions, prison reforms, etc. Then how do we develop? This is the crux of the talk. So far we have looked at all those aspects, general aspects, theoretical aspects. So this will be again more focused. Another 10. It's all okay. How much time do you have, Dr. Panda? 10 more.
5 minutes, madam. We'll take a couple of questions then.
Oh, I see. Fine. I'll scroll through these slides. Qualities and components of professional ethics to be followed in a professional context: honesty, integrity, transparency. Are we following this? You could question yourself. Am I transparent in my work style? Am I accountable to my colleagues, to my subordinates, to my seniors? Can somebody confide in me? Objectivity, respectfulness, and obedience to the law. Am I abiding to the administrative rules? So truthfulness, trustworthiness. So it's a self-retrospection, whether in communication, in beliefs or decisions, whether it is in actions also. Are you honest in your actions? Are you punctual? When I call for a meeting, am I there in time? Or do I mock at others without being in time? So do I accept my mistakes? If I'm late, do I admit that, yes, I'm late, I'm sorry? So all these together. They're very important, like beliefs, communication, decisions, actions. Then continuing, lying, avoid lying, not maintaining confidence. Yeah, if I try to share and mess up things among the colleagues, somebody shares some confidential issue with me, and I try to spread the rumor, that's something which I should not be doing. So we need to ask ourselves, how honest am I? So you could read this quote: being honest may not get you a lot of friends, but it will always get you the right ones. Then courage, physical courage. So how, yes, people with high adrenaline may be prepared to face challenges for them. So at what extent are we able to take up challenges, venturing into new things? Like Panda has applied for Atal program. It's a really good achievement to be appreciated, because there's a lot of competition from NITs and IIITs. Even I could not apply. In fact, I wanted to. I realized it may not be connected to us, because it's usually technical topics they have listed out when they have given the topics. But somehow Panda is very fortunate to have bagged this grant from AICTE. So it calls for courage and the mind, the commitment to do so towards his profession. Yes, I have to do this, though it's hard. Let me try. Let me give it a try. And it worked out. So how courageous are we? Even for most of the projects, there are most relevant ones, but then how confidently and courageously are we moving ahead in taking up these challenges? Intellectual challenge. Again, they are categorized: intellectual courage, social courage, and physical courage. Fine. Then cooperation, clash of ego, teamwork. In other words, teamwork. You're aware of what it calls for: teamwork, team spirit, tolerance towards others, overcoming the shortcomings of others and trying to bring them in line, in sync with others. So all these are needed as teachers for us to develop as part of our profession. Alignment to goals and adherence to ethical principles during the activities. Yes, that's a bond between the two. Empathy. Empathy is also important. Understanding others. See, I should understand from others' point of view what they go through, rather than imposing myself on any relation for that matter. This calls for a lot of maturity. I would use the term maturity. A lot of understanding in understanding others. It's not easy. It's not easy peripherally when I say you should empathize, you should know what the other person thinks, but you start executing it. We try to lose our temper very quickly at home, maybe with people around you, but then later we regret, why did I do? Did you take time to give it a thought? Were you wise enough in shouting back and retaliating at them? Did you ever step into the shoes of others and think about the reason for such behavior? So empathy is a very tough quality which very few people acquire. Self-confidence, of course, and challenge at the workplace, accepting challenges, courage, we have discussed this. Yeah, character, the last highlighted one you could go through. The people are of different characters, different attitudes. In teamwork especially, you should accept that. Yeah, most often it leads to displeasure. We are often put off by the behavior of other people while you work in a team at the department. All this happen at various levels of hierarchy. But then you should know, as a mature person, as a better learned, as a more knowledgeable person, you should know how to tolerate them. And try to negotiate also. Try working, negotiating, talk to them. Try to address the issue, talk to them, call them, message them. Give it a try, twice, thrice, and then ignore. That's fine. You go ahead with your work. Yeah, finally, dimensions of rules, responsibilities, and respect. These are the three terms, this acronym, which encompass the term social professional ethics. Thank you. That's the end of my.
Thank you so much, madam.
Yeah.
I request anybody, if you do have any queries, you can ask some queries.
Madam, I have a question, ma'am.
Please.
Sometimes, madam, dilemma leads to frustration, anxiety, or depression. Then how someone overcome this, ma'am?
Initially, you try to discuss with people. You try to share your problem with close friends, counselors, mentors, whomever you feel are trustworthy. That is one thing. Second is walking, exercise. Especially when you're under stress, take time to walk, go out in your campus or in your colony, wherever you are. Okay, and what is empathy and sympathy? I hope I have addressed to some extent, because at every level the problems are there, but the magnitude varies. You feel you're placed in such a big crisis, you're going through hell of experience. Other might also feel like always grass looks greener from the outside. Grass always looks greener from the outside. So you have to be aware of that and accordingly deal with things patiently. You wait and see. Let today pass. Wait. Time also will offer a solution to you. And be hopeful, be optimistic. And logically, you try to fight it out. You try to fight it out logically, give some attempts. If it doesn't work, leave it. Time itself will resolve the problem. And okay, sir. Have I addressed to you your question?
Hello? Yes, ma'am. Hello, ma'am. That's good. Shall we close down?
No, one more response. I have to respond to one more question. Empathy and sympathy difference. Sympathy is external. You sympathize. When I get to know that there are floods and one of the faculty members at NIT died out of corona recently. Last month, one of the professors, just 52, he died out of corona, and then I felt very bad for 1 day, 2 days. We organized condolence meeting, etc. Empathy is, I should know what the family goes through. He has small children. So what about the plight of family, wife? How will they survive? So how intensely I understand their feelings and offer my help. So usually close friends only can empathize with you. You have hundreds of friends. Not all of them you can trust. Only one or two empathize with your problem, and then they try to offer solution, and you get solace in that relation. So empathy is a rare quality. Not all of us can empathize with everyone. Even if there are floods around, we say, oh, how sad to know that, okay, people died in floods and earthquake, etc., etc. You're only sympathizing with them. But empathy is if you're going there and helping, trying to know what the problem is. Okay, that's all. Thank you very much for the opportunity given. So I thank the administration of St. Martin's Engineering College, the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, and I'm also thankful to Dr. Neel Madhav Panda for his wonderful initiation during COVID times. And I wish Panda good luck in all his endeavors. And I also thank all the participants for their patient and attentive listening during my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, madam.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the wonderful talk. And I'm little carried away with your literary interest and all. Now you have taken us back to classical Gothic area, and you have taken us all the ways and given us a beautiful historical background. At the same time, that was wonderful listening to you on the topic on ethics and the moral and ethics, how it comes to education especially, or it may be anything. Thank you so very much for coming and presenting. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, my pleasure, Dr. Panda. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just sign off.
Shall we go? Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Shall we drop for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and we'll be joining at 10:40 sharp for the next session. All of you, please. Thank you. Yes, ma'am, you are audible. Huh? No, I have to start it again.